we were just talking about speaking, and I know that you're a speaker too. For me, I just started doing it like 2 years ago, so it wasn't full time by any means, but it was starting to get part time. I'm fortunate because a lot of my friends and colleagues and peers are full time speakers, and it really threw a wrench into their system, right? Like they had to completely switch everything. So like, where did you fall in that? Like, is this something that completely threw you off, or are you able to pivot?
Well, 2020 was the year that I decided to focus on my online courses. So I guess I got something right there.
That's
But
awesome.
for me, my business, what I had for my business plan for 2020 was one third speaking,
Mm,
revenue from speaking, one third revenue from consulting, and one third revenue from online courses and webinars.
mhm.
So speaking, I never wanted to put all my eggs in the speaking basket,
Same.
also because I have, two young kids and getting on planes all the time. It was getting exhausting. So I was finding that I was at the point in my career where I could be a little more selective and I could charge a little bit more, especially if I had to fly across the country. But of course, all the conferences, all the events either pivoted to virtual or were canceled or scheduled to 2021. So actually, my next year is pretty full because a lot of things just said, you know what, we're not even going to
Right.
deal with this year. This year's canceled, so we're going to pivot to 2021. But I found that, there's just nothing that takes the place of speaking on stage and
You're
that
right about
feeling and that connection that you get and people coming up to you afterwards and talking to people at the informal events and connecting with them. So I'm very hopeful that we can go back to that, maybe safely next year. But I have been doing quite a lot online virtually. So it's worked out.
Yeah, you just I kind of have the same model. Maybe it's not a third, and third, but yeah, so you could just kind of push or pull that line a little bit, right? So if you had the
Yeah.
online courses and the webinars, you just kind of like bump that up a little bit. What like when you do what is the typical audience that you speak to?
I usually speak to development professionals and marketing professionals.
Okay.
So, in terms of like paid speaking and free speaking are very different. So, your free speaking would be Association of Fundraising Professionals, where you could really get in front of several hundred people that
Mhm.
could be your potential students, potential clients. But then I do speak at a lot of associations. So the New England Library Association. So it's usually a specific vertical that hires me to do a keynote or a presentation, like the State Policy Network or it varies by association,
Mhm.
but normally my track is small to mid-size, maybe even mid-size to a little bit larger, but usually development and marketing professionals are in the audience.
Now I know
And that's where I came from.
you're deep into the nonprofit space. Is that like is that all of the work that you do, or most of it?
Yes. No,
Okay,
that's it.
that's
So
it.
I only work with, you don't have to show me your 501c3 IRS letter, but I work with like emerging nonprofits, small, mid-sized libraries,
Mhm.
and some government associations. Like I just did a social media audit for the city of Fitchburg, for example. So,
Got it.
but the primary group that I focus on, fundraisers and nonprofit communicators.
Well, where did that start for you?
That's just been my professional trajectory. So I worked in nonprofits throughout college doing internships. I volunteered for the US Peace Corps. I was in Africa, in Senegal, West Africa for 2.5 years doing healthcare work, which was
Okay.
interesting because I was a liberal arts major, but that's where they send you. And I met a lot of NGOs there and charities and really became interested in the work. Then came home and had kind of a string of fundraising jobs, served on boards, pretty much did everything other than actually run an organization as an executive director, and went off on my own about 10 years ago.
Did they continue to be in like the healthcare space, or were they in a variety of
No, they're in a variety. My clients are everything from, like I said, libraries to land
yeah.
trusts to food banks to animal organizations to rare disease organizations. So they really run the gamut of missions and causes.
Where do you think that originated though? Like what kind of a kid were you?
I was Leslie Knope as a child. Like
Yes.
that's my soulmate. And I was into checklists, and
I love it.
I did the food drive. I mean,
Like you were like
I
that
was
since a
reading
kid.
my old journals. I do not know why people were friends with me. I organized a recycling drive at my elementary school in 5th grade, literally called the mayor and the city council and did a presentation, and some got recycling because we had styrofoam trays, and I was a huge environmentalist. I used to be a vegetarian, and I'm not a vegetarian anymore, but I was very into environmental causes.
That's so
And
funny.
then I did organize, this is something I'm proud of, in my middle school, the very first, gay rights activism day, when I was in 8th grade, and then took that into high school because some of my friends were gay. But that was back in the 90s, and people didn't really talk about it, especially when you were younger.
Hmm.
But just this notion of activism and social justice, really, I've had it my whole life. And I've always been really interested in helping people, or really just learning about other people's experiences,
Yeah,
and
that's it right there.
using there wasn't a word for what it was then, but the word now is of course privilege. So using
Mm.
my privilege, which I didn't know it was then, to amplify other voices and, help other people reach their potential. So
Yeah.
it's just been something I've always been passionate about. And
You,
women's issues as well, as you can tell by my wall behind me.
yeah, I love that. Was it something maybe your parents instilled in you, or you just literally were born Leslie Knope?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that they were anti any of these
Of
issues.
course, yeah.
But no, it
But it
wasn't
was
like they brought me to marches or anything like
that's
that.
so funny. So you're
Which
just
I bring my
naturally a
kids to
good
marches.
person.
I don't know. I've also always been really outspoken and
Yeah.
an extrovert, and I don't get easily embarrassed. So I
Mhm.
find that I have an easier time speaking up for people, and I have an easier time calling people out on things,
Mhm.
because I just don't really have that filter. So maybe that's part of it
That's
as
just the
well.
Boston in you, or just
That's the Boston in me. Yes, definitely.
All right, so then you started working in nonprofits, the Peace Corps, and things like that. At what point did it shift into like the fundraising, marketing side of things? I know that you're in the storytelling space. That's why we're here talking today. But like,
Yes.
at what point did it switch from like, okay, I'm just helping these nonprofits to like, oh, I'm actually able to help in this manner better than building a house for Habitat for Humanity. I'm able to help them send their messages.
Yes. I studied journalism in college,
Okay.
and I'm a writer. I love writing. I love craft stories. I love communicating. And that is absolutely my strength, my essential skill.
Mhm.
And what I found was that nonprofits, of course, they're social workers a lot of the time, or they're people that just have really big hearts, but they went to school for something
Mhm.
else, and they don't have the marketing communication
Big
skills
time.
and the communications training that I had, or even the inclination. A lot of people hate writing. They
Yeah.
don't want to be on camera. They don't want to take photos. They don't want to do anything for social media, write that newsletter. So that was where my kind of passion for doing those kinds of things came in. So the other great thing about having a journalism degree is that you get trained to spot a good story and spot a good hook and an angle. So when I was working, I'm thinking for a domestic violence shelter in
Mhm.
Virginia, and I was development / marketing director, which a lot of organizations combine the two roles if they don't have a big enough budget. And I would write press releases, but they would be so boring because the executive director would say, "Oh, we have to send out a press release about this." And I would say, "Well, there's not a good hook or an angle to it." And that's when I started to realize the importance of gathering stories that can back up what you're saying, because that's what a reporter wants. If you
Mhm.
read any article in the newspaper, if you listen to the human interest stories on the radio, and I listen to a lot of NPR and a lot of podcasts, it always starts with a story to kind of put things in context, and then they talk about the data, and then they go into the statistics, and they go into the quotes and things like that. So that's how I really learned how to hone my craft,
Mhm.
was figuring out, okay, I want people to pay attention to this nonprofit. I want people to read. I want people to listen. I want people to subscribe. I want people to donate. But the only way to do that is to have a story that's going to grab their attention and compel them to want to learn a little bit more and get involved. So it evolved from, I thought I was going to be a magazine journalist and travel the world and interview hundreds of people and write all of these cover stories, to I'm now going to help nonprofits tell their story in just as a compelling way as like a Vanity Fair or a Rolling Stone.
Absolutely. And I like that you brought up the executive director, because it's almost like any executive director that you deal with, they're going to come back and be like, well, no, we got to feature this. We got to mention this. We got to talk about this. And it's all like, that's all the boring stuff. I know it's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's important for the audience, we can get it in there. But like you said, it's got to be after that
Yeah.
hook. And this is a battle I find myself having to fight as well. It's like, no, we got to mention this service. We got to mention this program, this program, this program. Like, you're just spouting off a list of programs. That's not
that's just a recounting of things that happen. My favorite nonprofit press release is the rebranding press release. So I've worked with a lot of organizations on rebranding. I'm not a graphic designer, but how to do a launch of a rebranding.
Mm-hmm.
And they always think that it's so exciting that they got a rebrand. And I say,
just to you,
it might be exciting. It is exciting. You spent a lot of money. Maybe you worked really hard on it, but to your average donor, your average supporter, people that don't really know much about you, there has to be the story of the why, like why now, why this, what's the story of the rebranding, what ended up happening, what did you learn, what did you struggle with, what are your challenges? So I know that organizations, they really they're so passionate about what they do, and they're so excited, and they know so much. They have that curse of knowledge where they know so much, but it's hard for them to step back and see, the forest for the trees, if you will. So I like to think that my superpower is helping them take that step back and helping them really figure out what is the most important piece of this message, and how can we make it more concise and more clear and more compelling to the average, person that's going to watch the video or read the blog post.
That reminds me of, I had a nonprofit client earlier this year, and they were rebranding, and they made a big to-do about it. They had a whole event, like a live event back when we had those. And of course the newsletters and all that, but at least they hired me to create, to tell a story of one of their star students. They were like, not an after school program, doesn't do them justice, but they're a program that helps people through middle school and high school go to college. Basically, it's like a whole 9-year process. And so we told the story of this young woman who they helped, who is just an all-star and a perfect success story. So at least they packaged that in the rebrand. They used that story of someone they've served and helped as the kind of like pillar of that rebrand communication they were putting out there.
Yeah, and I think like anything else, I mean, it's a story of your vision for the future, because there was a reason that you have a new logo, maybe you have a new name, you have a new website. There's a reason there, and that's what I'm trying to really drill into with nonprofit communications, is the why, and how can you express it in a way to make people care.
Now, this is interesting, because I think a lot of people may hear that and think like, well, the why behind why we, changed our logo, like, is that important? Why is that important? To me, like, I feel like, and let me know if you agree, I feel like that transparency and authenticity is kind of overused these days, but just that, to me, I talk about opening up the curtains and letting people see behind the scenes a little bit, to show them your why and your purpose. Like, if you have a good reason why that rebrand was happening, what was your mission not coming across clearly? Was there something new that happened in the organization that made you want, your logo want to reflect these changes? Like, I get that. I love thinking about that. And I feel like some people may be reluctant to open up and tell the journey of creating their new logo. But isn't that a real opportunity to connect with your people? Not by saying like, hey, donate to us necessarily, or here's a program we need funding for, but continuing to build that connection between our communities, right? Even opening that
Yes.
door and letting them in on that journey is effective, I would think.
So the most popular brands, they do this by creating a shared identity with their customers. So if you think about, some of the greatest examples is like Apple. You're
Mhm.
an Apple user, and if you're an
Right.
Apple user, you love Apple. I'm a Google Pixel user. We have Google all over our house.
Mhm.
I just happen to really like Google products. So it where you shop, where you donate, who you pay attention to, the kind of information you're consuming, it's all part of your identity and your worldview, your values, and your ethics. So if you're more transparent as a nonprofit, you're building that, you're helping your donors understand that they are part of this community with you, rather than just simply pushing out information and telling them things. Hopefully you're bringing them along and helping them feel like they're part of a group, they're part of something bigger than themselves, and they're not just an ATM machine, or
Mhm.
they're not just like pulling out their checkbook every time they talk to you. They really are invested in the future of your organization and solving the problem. And whatever your solution is to the problem that you're solving, you really want people to miss you if you were gone.
I love that line. That's good. Um, so if I'm a nonprofit organization or someone working, usually there's often one person that's every department. Um, and I want to open up and I want to tell those stories. You mentioned something earlier where we talked about often those people are social workers, and they don't want to put up with the work. They don't want to create a content plan. They struggle to create these stories. They're not artists. They're not filmmakers. They're not writers. So what's a way that they can do these things that we're talking about? Well, what's a way to simplify that? What's a way that they can do that when
Mm,
they aren't a journalist? They aren't a filmmaker. Like, they still are tasked with it themselves. They can't necessarily outsource it. What's the
yes.
what's the easiest way to do these things that we're talking about, using stories to connect with our communities and build our communities, but that's like simple, like that anyone can do it?
Yep.
What advice would you give
Well,
for somebody like that?
first of all, I don't think that social media should be outsourced completely. So, Facebook ads, Google ads, things that are very scientific and technical and hard to do, or video certainly could be outsourced, professional photography, that kind of thing. But the real meat and potatoes of what you should be posting on social media really should be from your perspective, the program officer's perspective, from people that are inside the organization every single day and eat, sleep, and breathe the cause.
Hmm.
So that's a question I get all the time. Do you do social media for people? And I always say, well, no. Like I'll help you figure out what are the best things to post and how to get them. But I really believe that the most effective organizations are documenting what they're doing every day. So
Hmm.
that's a famous Gary Vee quote. I'm not Gary Vee's biggest fan, but I do like that one quote that he had: document, don't create. We get so focused in content creation. We have to have a perfect content calendar. Every photo has to be perfect. Every video has to be perfect. We have to have this perfect, from A to Z, soup to
Hmm.
nuts story that's all tied up in a bow. So
It's daunting.
that's something that's carried along for nonprofits as long as I have worked in nonprofit organizations. But if you look at the way people communicate now, the influencers, the most popular influencers online get vulnerable. They get out of their comfort zone. They talk about their personal stories. They document what they're doing during the day. And I think for nonprofits, we have such an opportunity. A lot of us have to deal with client confidentiality, and I understand that. But you, as a development director, you, as an executive director, you can be the face of the organization. You can give me an update every Friday that just says, here are the 3 things you need to know this week. Here's what's going on, especially in these crazy, uncertain times that we're in right now. I think it's even more important to be out there and talking about what is going on in the trenches, on the ground in your organization. So thinking about it as just taking out your phone and doing a really quick post, taking a really quick photo, even if you're just working from home, maybe getting other people on your staff to show how they're working from home or show what they're doing right now. How are you opening up? Like, what are the precautions you're using? I
Mm,
know in Boston, where I live, the museums are allowed to open up as of today. And several of the local museums around here, they've been doing Facebook Lives to show you how they're reopening, like
very
what they're
cool.
doing. It's interesting.
Great
So they're
idea.
not creating this perfect content that's going to
Right.
live
They're
forever.
documenting.
They're documenting. And I just, that's what social media is supposed to be for. It's like a it's like a big document of your life. You know, when you look at your Facebook memories, you think, oh my gosh, that was 10 years ago.
So right. That's so true.
So if you think about it like that, I think it's a little bit less
It is.
stressful.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. This is such a great point because people do that to themselves and they build this mountain in their mind of what they need to accomplish. I love what you said. Like it has to be a perfect story and it has to be, I have clients like this, you know, that like
Yes.
that blog post won't go out until it's perfect or that even that Instagram picture. I love that. This is such a great tip. And the Facebook Live with the museums is a great example of like, it's just documenting. It's just documenting and putting that out there. So you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
you know, during this time, which we can't avoid, and I recorded podcasts months ago that that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about this, and we're still in it, and we don't know when we'll be out of this time. And
Mm-hmm.
as you and I said before we started recording, things are going to be permanently changed with how we face the world.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I've noticed with my nonprofit clients is like, well, for them and everyone else, it's difficult. It's a struggle, right? Especially people who rely on donations when everyone else is either out of work, losing work, or not sure what's going to happen to their job and kind of holding things tight to the chest. Buying luxury items, donating to causes, often those are the things that kind of like go away when you're focused on, hey, I got to feed my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that creates an issue for nonprofits, including the ones that I work with. They're like, okay, well, it's hard for us to do our programs or our content or anything when we're not sure how long our cash flow is going to last. So my question is, what are the creative ways that you have pivoted in terms of how you're helping nonprofits, and what are the creative ways that you suggest or advise them to pivot during this time that we don't know when we'll come back from? Like, how are we able to sustain and maybe even thrive if we're lucky, but how are we going to navigate this time as a nonprofit when we don't know when the you know, when the light at the end of the tunnel is going to appear?
Right. I mean, there's really no doubt that people are struggling right now. The United States, across the world, small businesses are struggling. Nonprofits, individuals are really, you know, faced with the fact that we thought this might be over in a few months and it's not, and we don't know when our unemployment check is going to run out, or we don't even know if we'll have a job, you know, to wake up to in the next week. But the interesting thing is that giving is actually up right now, or at least it was a few weeks ago. So Stephen Screen, who you might know of the Better Fundraising the Better Fundraising Company, he put out a study, and he's been doing a lot of surveying donors and surveying nonprofits as to what's going on with their fundraising right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he found that while the majority of nonprofits are not fundraising, the ones that are actually really bringing in a lot of money.
Amazing.
So what I think is happening is that when we are faced with a crisis, people still remain generous and committed to the causes they care about. They might not be able to give as much, they might not be able to give to as many causes, and certainly there are some people that aren't able to give at all. But the ones that are, older people, especially if they are living, you know, on retirement and they don't have to leave the house and they're pretty
Yeah.
secure. So what I wouldn't want nonprofits to do is, I don't want them to bury their heads in the sand and say, we're just going to emerge from this when the dust settles, because it's not going to settle. And even if it settles, it will be in a completely different way than it was when it got kicked up.
Yeah.
And give your donors a chance. If you don't need to fundraise right now, then don't do it. I wouldn't do anything if you don't need to do it. But if you desperately do need the funds to survive, I have gotten those appeals from the food banks that say, we need this much money just to ride out the next couple of months. Here's our plan. Here's exactly what we're going to do. You've been a loyal donor to us for years. We'd love to have your help. I think being honest and open about your needs and understanding that just because you're not a COVID-19 emergency fund, like maybe
Right.
you're not on the front lines, your mission doesn't take a pause because we're in a global pandemic. Breast cancer doesn't end.
Right.
Colorectal cancer doesn't end. Animal abuse doesn't end. Domestic violence doesn't end. None of this takes a pause because we're in a pandemic. And a lot of times people want to have agency and they want to feel like they're in control and they want to feel like they're helping people that are worse off than they are, or they still want to contribute to causes that they really care passionately about because it helps them feel better. It helps them gain that sense of normalcy that we're all craving right now. So I would caution people against this pushback that I know a lot of people are getting from their boards and their
Mm.
executive director, where they say, well, we don't want to fundraise right now. Well, if not now, when? I mean, we're going to be entering a recession if we're not already in it. Things are going to probably get a lot worse on the giving front once the dust does settle a little bit more. So if there's that opportunity to make that connection with your donors, or even just inform them as to what you're doing, if you're not comfortable asking for money right now, just send out that newsletter. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know what's going on, and let them know there are opportunities to help if they can help and if they're willing and able to help. So I just don't want people to make assumptions for their audience and for their donors right now when there are a lot of people that do want to give back and do want to help.
Hmm. This makes me think of what you said and what we talked about earlier. It's if you build this community that you let them be a part of, it's a lot different than like you said, you're not treating them as an ATM machine, which nobody has. Well, not nobody, but most of us don't have expendable cash right now that we're just ready
Mm-hmm.
to send out. But this concept that we keep coming back to about if you let them in to your journey, right, and let them be a part of this community that you are all together focused on the same mission, that's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different. Like now when you're struggling, like people are more motivated to help because they're helping themselves, that the community they're a part of. That's a lot
Right.
different. So we keep coming back to the same themes,
Mm-hmm.
which I like. And
Mm-hmm.
and I know that stories is one of the best way, if not the best way, to create that community and those connections. Right, we belong to the
Yep.
same group, we're fighting for the same cause. Yeah, I love that. I know you
And well,
have.
there's a lot of information out there as well. So what I've been seeing nonprofits really be very strategic and thoughtful with their communications. So it's not business as usual. It's not, okay,
Right.
we have to stick to a content calendar. We have to get an Instagram post out every week. It's much more, let's only give the highest quality, most useful content right now. And we'll be concise, we'll be clear, we'll lead with compassion. We understand that people are exhausted and tired and confused, and we're just not going to overwhelm them right now. But we also aren't going to just fade into the background. We're still going to be communicating, but we're going to do it on a much maybe more focused and more like a much higher quality
Yeah.
level.
Maybe this is one of those things, those serendipitous things that will come out of this, is that you don't
Yes.
have to feel like just because it's Tuesday I have to put out a post, but when you
Oh
have
my
something
God.
worthy of saying, you
Yes.
make a quality post.
Well, Steven Screen, I think it was him. He wrote in his blog post, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but he
Uh,
wrote, they've cut out
absolutely.
all the bullshit. Nonprofits they've cut it all out because there's
Yep.
no time
Nobody
and there's no
cares.
staff and they're too busy and donors are too busy. And now it's all just hopefully going to get back to the roots of what you do and just strip everything else away, all the jargon, all the,
Absolutely.
the 30-page email newsletter, just all getting stripped down.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that have that mentality of like, well, we got to get a YouTube video out on Tuesday. It's like, do you, like, why? Like, who's
Yeah.
making you, like, not just for a YouTube video on Tuesday's sake. Like, what's the
Yep.
message? What's the purpose? So I do think that's something that we're seeing, an effect that we're seeing. Now, we had talked in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning about you kind of shifting your business
Mm-hmm.
model to more webinars and online courses. What are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that you have available for people if they did want to learn more, especially now that they're having to focus on putting out quality content, continuing to keep those connections with their community? Like, what are some of the products and services that you have available for nonprofits?
Sure. So I do a mix of, free kind of higher level webinars and then really in-depth, step-by-step how-to webinars. So if you go to my website, it's jcsocialmarketing.com. There's a tab online courses, and I run 90-minute webinars, usually focused on a specific platform. So I do those every month. Those are one-offs, like Instagram for beginners or
Okay.
Facebook fundraising. I'm developing one on YouTube fundraising, and you'll
And the
see the
court
full list of them on the website.
and the webinars are on your site, or do you
Yeah, the link to the webinar. They are with
okay,
charityhowto.com. I
sure.
partner with Charity How To.
Cool.
And then for my own self, I do these 6-week live courses. I do one on storytelling that just finished, and I do one on social media. I call it a social media academy.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
full-scale online training program for nonprofit. These are both targeted to
Mhm.
nonprofits, and I'm going to run that again in the fall, the social media academy. So this was my pilot year for both of the courses. They went extremely well.
Awesome.
I launched one in February, and the middle of the course was March 17th, that week when
That
everything
week.
kind of went to
Yeah.
hell. And I'm really glad. Oh, and I launched storytelling course in May. So
Amazing.
in
Killing
the
it.
middle of the pandemic, I said, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. But the thing is, I love giving them live because so much is changing now. I don't like to record something and then put it out there and sell it, because so much is like, I can't even imagine if I
Rapidly.
recorded that social
Yeah.
media course and sold it and then coronavirus happened. I mean, that
Dude.
would be, nobody would have gotten anything out of it. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
like
great
being able
point.
to pivot as I go. And clearly that course changed a lot.
Well,
And a lot of the time we were just on Facebook Lives crying and having like therapy sessions. And
mm,
that's what we were, that's a lot of
that's
what
a
we
big
did, but
part
I
of
think
it.
it was wonderful.
Well, it's like a great time for that sort of learning too, for online courses. I mean, people that are stuck at home more often
Yes.
than they are used to. It's a good
And then
opportunity.
all these nonprofits that relied on in-person events. And I understand why, relied on your golf fundraiser, relied on your gala,
Right.
relied on your races,
What do they do?
a ton of organizations, and through no fault of their own have had to completely change their fundraising model, their marketing models. So I've really great sympathy, but that's definitely been a question I've gotten a lot. How do we go to a virtual event? How do
Did
we turn this event into a virtual event?
Don't you have something for live streaming as well? Like a course or
Um,
I saw, or was that just
I'm going to be creating it as I have a blog post and
okay.
some ebooks, but I'm going to be creating a live element of the social media course is going to be on live streaming.
Oh, that's awesome. I have one of my clients who I've worked with for 10 years doing video production. They pivoted to that, and
Yep.
I actually host a talk show, like a Facebook Live talk show with them. They're a
Nice.
healthcare foundation. And so we just have doctors on. Sometimes we talk
Yep.
about the disease, sometimes we talk about other things, but people love it. People all over the world tune in, and it's just a conversation. It's just documenting that interview, basically. It's
Yep.
not,
Yep.
it's very
I love that. Susan G. Komen, Florida, my good friend Josh Hirsch, who now actually is the director of social media marketing for Susan G. Komen National. He just started
That's awesome.
today, actually, now that I think about it. But he helped them create all of this content because they had to cancel their race. They had to
Mhm.
cancel a lot of their Mother's Day appeals that they were
Yeah.
doing. They have a huge race in October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So he really helped them jump more into live streaming and do the kind of thing that you said. They did, wellness tips, they did
Yeah.
yoga, they did a meditation, they did
That's very
healthy
cool.
cooking. So it's still on brand for them, but
Yeah.
it was useful and timely and relevant, and really didn't cost anything. They purchased, a few microphones and some ring lights, but that was it. So it didn't really
Absolutely.
cost much, and
Uh,
their audience loved it.
Of course they did. I mean, that's like perfect content from them, and
Yep.
it's unique. And it's like these are one of those things that we also keep coming back to, that like maybe that's this kind of stuff you should have been offering at least partially anyway,
Yeah.
like a
Yep.
cooking class, like for a breast cancer.
I think, and I know it's interesting. I know quite a few directors that really wanted to do more live streaming or more virtual fundraising that had gotten some pushback from their board and executive director that then called them and said, okay, all those ideas you had, let's do them. Let's figure
Right. Of
out,
course.
let's figure out how we can do them now.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
if there's any silver lining, and I really hate to use the word silver lining when, hundreds of thousands of people have died,
Right.
but I think that nonprofits are going to be forced to be even more resourceful
Mhm.
because we thought we were pushed to our literal limit with being resilient and resourceful. They're going to have to be even more and do even more innovation, figure out more creative ways to get their message out there and to connect with their constituents digitally.
Mhm.
And I see it as an opportunity.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to stop for today. I appreciate your time, but I like the concept of seeing things as an opportunity because, like you said, the mission doesn't stop, the cause
Mm-mm.
doesn't end.
No.
So we got to find a way to push through and prevail. But thank you so much. I'm excited that we finally got to
Thanks,
connect this
Rain.
way, and I love your energy and your passion and your mission and what you're about and what you stand for. So I hope
Well,
that
hopefully we'll meet in person. We'll
yeah,
still
one
be
of
on, we'll
these
still
days,
connect on Twitter.
we had a shot
Yep.
before everything went down, now
Mm-hmm.
that we're both out there speaking and stuff. But it'll happen. It'll definitely
It'll
happen.
happen.
One more time, what was your website for those courses for those that were interested? I'll put it in the show notes too.
jcsocialmarketing.com and just look at the online courses tab.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay
Thanks.
safe.
You
Have a
too.
great day.
Take care.